Welcome back to episode 2 of Brokers of Secrets. Now, this is probably one of the, if not the most important episode when it comes to how you can optimize your life by starting with optimizing your mind and your identity. Now, what's your identity, right? What's the definition of an identity? It's very simple. If we look at it, you look at your identity, there's an equal mark next to it. What would come after the equal mark, right? If you have this is me equals what? Now, you may be able to come up with 10, 20, 30 attributes, descriptions, as you may call it. But these are actually definitions. So if you pull out a piece of paper, you can do this right after or even now if you want to and pause the podcast. You basically pull out a piece of paper or your notepad or even your phone and start typing down things that come to your mind as we go. Because these identity traits, these definitions that many of us may think are descriptions, these definitions will help us see and peek into your deep subconscious to understand how you define yourself and who you are. Now, these definitions aren't just going to be good ones. Because if you're in a quiet space where nobody's watching what you're writing down or typing down, you may find yourself writing things down that you may or may not want to admit. You may or may not want to think about. You may or may not feel like, oh man, that's me. It might even feel a little awkward or you might feel a little hesitant or insecure when you write things down, write these things down. And now, that being said, it's important to understand that we're not expecting you to be perfect. Nobody is perfect. That's true. That being said, that doesn't stop us from wanting to be better, right? So as you pull out this piece of paper or notepad or your phone and you start writing down your name and then equal what, right? These definitions will help us understand not only your identity, but your identity governs what's important to you. And what's important to you is really, really important because they govern your beliefs. Think about that hierarchy. If your identity governs what's important to you, and what's important to you govern your beliefs, then we can actually and easily create a change in your belief system by simply tweaking what's going on inside of your identity. And perhaps also what is important to you, right? Imagine being able to change one identity trait and causes not only maybe one or two, but maybe even tens or hundreds of belief changes. That's what we call a systematic change. And when you change at that level, there's a massive, massive domino effect in all areas of your life. So now I know I gave you somewhat more of the technical explanation of why understanding and being able to optimize your identity may be very useful. That being said, let me tell you a quick story. And this will illustrate some, I would say, useful insights. So I remember growing up, we didn't have a lot of money. And if you guys listen to the previous episode, you get a bigger glimpse into my upbringing. Growing up, we didn't have a lot of money. And I remember every time we had a meal, my parents would tell me how hard it is to make the money to provide and therefore have the food. Well, as time went on, it became deeply ingrained in my mind that what I was eating was the result or outcome of my father's blood, sweat, and tears, and my mother's, right? And they worked really hard to provide, therefore we have this food. Now, nothing wrong with that understanding. That being said, because it became so deeply ingrained, and I witnessed my father sacrificing his health and my mother sacrificing her health to provide the food, right? And to provide the food for our survival, right? Me and my brothers. I started to link these things together. And I would say I observe, here's an important piece. I observe my parents and I perceive them as really good people because they are, and that is the identity I wanted. growing up, I was like, I want to be a good person. Like my parents, they sacrifice even their health to provide and to give me what I wanted. Now, fast forward into my adulthood, I found myself not taking care of my health, my sleep, my many areas that has to do with my well-being. And I remember trying to go to the gym. I remember trying to eat healthy. I remember trying to do certain things. Trying is the key word, right? To get myself into more optimal states physically. And of course, that influences everything. Well, I would find myself doing it, and then something would happen. I would self-sabotage. It's almost like there's a thermostat monitoring, governing how far I would let myself improve my health and my fitness. And it was interesting. I couldn't figure out for a while what was happening because it was low on my value in terms of it was just not important. And the reason it wasn't important was because in my mind, if I had the health and the fitness, then I'm not sacrificing enough to provide for myself and my family, or provide for the people I care about, my company. I was literally reenacting what my parents were doing in order to identify as a good person. Now, that's kind of sad to listen to that, but it's also enlightening. As I uncover that, I realize, wait, if I could simply let that go, I wonder what would happen, right? Now, that's not the only layer. There are deeper layers to that, but that first layer completely changed my life when it comes to my health and how I feel, my well-being, and simply, it gave me a lot more energy. And frankly, there are a lot of more benefits than that. That being said, my goal in sharing this is that I was so identified with this, I'm a good person. I made sure I met the requirements of being a good person that I observed growing up. And so that identity trait in my mind equal to sacrificing my health and other well-being, other parts of my well-being. Now, if this doesn't fully hit home yet, think about this. Where in your life are you identifying with? Maybe it's a parental figure or an authority figure, or maybe someone you were close with, a teacher or an idol, or somebody that you felt were very admirable, someone you wanted to be like when you were younger, when you were growing up. Yet they also had certain parts of their identity where they have behaviors that frankly are not ideal, right? I mean, how many of us witness that there was an entire era of television and movies where everybody was smoking, right? And these were typically the main characters and they were cool. So to many of the audience, they thought smoking unconsciously would make them feel as cool as the main character, right? And frankly, that same tactic, strategy is still being used in television and in movies, right? Why are product placements so important, right? Now, my goal in sharing with you all of this is to help you begin to identify maybe the sources of where these things are coming from, your identity traits, and the consequences of these identity traits or attributes that you identify with. So as you consider this, now you know perhaps these are some of the sources, because look, how you grew up, where you grew up, your community that you grew up with, even the church or not the church or organizations, religious organizations or social organizations that you've participated in, all of those have influence. And then, of course, I just brought up television, movie, media, entertainment. That has a massive impact on people's identity. Because think about it. How does the television or movie or entertainment industry portray attractiveness, portray what it looks like to be wealthy, to be successful, to be X, Y, Z? Now, if you observe carefully, completely sober, you will notice that these many identities are tied into something that's profitable for specific industries. Nothing wrong with that. What I am saying is you got to be able to make choices, not because you want to identify with something that's not actually going to serve you. I'm interested in asking you, how do you identify yourself and what these attributes are, right? And when you begin to understand these attributes, you will understand that they govern what's important to you and also govern your belief system. And as you come to that understanding, now you can look at, okay, wow. And it's really easy. That piece of paper or a notepad or your phone, you start typing your name equals what? And you just write an exhaustive list. And even when you run out, you keep asking, what else do I identify with? How else would I describe myself or define myself, right? Ideally, I would invite you to write 30-ish or 30 or more attributes. Because as you do that, you are not just, because look, you're going to run out of stuff to write, maybe after 10, maybe after 15 or 20. If you keep going, even after you exhaust all the things you can come up with consciously and you do it again, you run out of that again, and then you keep pushing yourself to write more, you are drawing from your subconscious your identity, your real identity. So the first things that come to mind may not be deep enough. We want you to really pull these attributes out of your subconscious. Now, people don't usually question their identity and or their values. Unfortunately, unless there's something traumatic or something extremely, wonderful, right? That being said, the trauma or the traumatic side of things actually happen for a lot of people quite frequently, which then, well, for lack of better words, people typically don't look at their identity and change them until there's some very sad or unfortunate trauma. We don't want that, right? We want you to be able to preemptively optimize your identity so that your value system and your belief system naturally match your goals instead of uncomfortably having to be pushed into changing. Now, the good news is, even if you were finding yourself in a situation as you're listening to this, hopefully we're all safe and healthy, right, as you're listening, because look, there are always tools to help you optimize. What I'm saying here is, if you even found yourself ever in a situation where you're like, this is not ideal, and maybe there's trauma, maybe there's something unfortunate that happened, or maybe it's just something not going the way you want, what you could do is you could still, of course, you're going to be examining what you believe, what's important to you, and even your identity during these times. These times, they are pretty natural to do. As you do that, become truly conscious of, hey, if this is happening, right, how do I identify in this situation? Now, here's why I'm bringing this up. A lot of people, when they experience trauma, they look at their identity. They actually will look at their identity, their value system, their belief system. But that doesn't mean they have the tools or strategies or understanding to add good things to their identity, right? For example, if I share with you this story, it will make a lot of sense. So you guys heard the story from last episode, so I'm not going to give you the full story. I'm just going to give you big picture. So my grandfather got married, 10 days later went on a business trip, right? And then he was gone for 11 years due to post-World War II, just events that happened that were very unfortunate. And he couldn't get home for 11 years. Now that's pretty tough for a newlywed couple to be separated for 11 years. So guess what kind of identity traits they began to associate with, right? And I'll tell you specifically, when my grandfather was gone for that long, in his mind, he was like, wow, the pursuit of money leads to unhappiness and separation and loss of family. That was what happened. That being said, if someone carries that belief and they find that family is very important, they are going to not pursue wealth and success, right? That identity trait of I'm a good family man and I'm not going to pursue anything that would sabotage the family life. And in his mind, business and the pursuit of wealth actually cost him his opportunity to be with his wife for 11 years. That's pretty dang traumatic, right? So all of his kids were taught similar things. So they never quite become the entrepreneurs or the executives that they wanted to be. All of them worked jobs or companies that would allow them to stay really close to their family, and business or wealth was less than secondary, because in their mind, their identity is, I'm going to be a good family man. And then as a part of that, right, their value system devalues money. And then, but they still need money. And then there's that belief system that, hey, I can't sacrifice my family. Therefore, I'm going to sacrifice something else to create wealth, which then led to what I brought up earlier. My father sacrifices health so that he could provide for the family. These are all connected. If you can see the big picture, you can see how all of them are connected. So as I witness all of this, completely unconsciously, I didn't know. I thought that was just how it was for them. But imagine how many people across the globe have one form or another experienced something similar, a scarcity event, a trauma, or something that caused them to identify as someone. Hey, I'm a good person, right? I'm gonna be sacrificing this or that. There's got to be a sacrifice, a grind, or something, a hustle. That the hustle mentality. There's got to be that sacrifice so that I can have whatever it is. Now I'm going to tell you, I'm not saying it's not true. Of course, you can use physical energy to do more. That's of course. That being said, we will only, listen carefully, perform to the degree in which our identity permits us to. Whether it's your income, whether it's your relationship, whether it's your health and fitness, they are all, and not to mention your mental, emotional states and your ability to feel self-love and self-appreciation and worthiness, your own personal growth, all of these, and even your spirituality, by the way, right? All of these things are actually all governed by your identity. See, you've met people where they're like, oh, I'm just not smart. Or, oh, I'm just not meant to be an entrepreneur. Or, oh, I'm not a risk taker. Or, oh, and look, by the way, if you don't take risks, like you don't experience exponential growth. There's always risk, because here's the thing. Why would you identify something as risky? Of course, because you have not done it, and or that you find that other people wouldn't do this, wouldn't take such risk, right? But if everybody's doing it, everybody would, right? Everybody would if they know that this was going to succeed, right? If they can handle that risk, if they're risk tolerant, if they want what they want enough. Look, risky things are always not going to be things that people always do, right? Everybody does. It's going to be a select group of humans who, look, obviously, if we call them risky, there's a chance they will fail. There's a huge chance that they may lose everything. That being said, there are, a whole other conversation, but I want to start off on because we can talk about designing your opportunities, designing your clients, designing who you work with to mitigate that risk. That being said, it also goes right back to your identity. Do you identify as someone who is going to have deals that will work out well? Do you identify as someone that's going to succeed? Do you identify as someone who will inevitably succeed regardless of what happens, right? And that you always pick the best risks. And that causes you, right, to experience massive success. If you are having none of those things and you don't have these success factors written into your identity, and you identify as a loser or someone who's unlucky or someone who's never going to succeed, or identify with someone that has to work hard in order to succeed, and because money doesn't grow on trees, or if you identify as someone that's like, hey, I'm an underdog, or if you identify as someone that's like, I have to sacrifice, I have to be the hero to enjoy and have the rewards, or you identify as someone that's like, oh man, like it's very, very hard to make money and to succeed, and I'm just trying. If you identify as any of these and more, I think you're picking up what I'm putting down. If you identify as someone who's not succeeding, and that you don't identify as a millionaire or beyond, how could you be a millionaire and or beyond, right? If you identify as someone that's less, that's lower income class, and that you identify as being poor or broke and or, again, a loser, what happens is that identity will, well, it will govern, but it will also exhibit in your value system what's important to you. You will devalue the things that will actually cause you to be successful and value the things that cause you to stay where you are. And then your belief system will match that. And of course, then your behaviors. Now, I know this may sound like a more technical episode where we explain the structure of identity and how it governs not only your values and your beliefs, but your behaviors and your reality. You are, you're going to live the life that's equal to your identity. It's that be first, and then by being so, and I wouldn't even say be, do, have, it's the being that causes you to resonate at a very specific way or a specific frequency and a wavelength, right, that attracts the kind of people that you want. Now, if you are, again, using that same type of language, if you're vibrating very low, right, very, if we're talking about financially, you will attract the same type of people that are vibrating very low. Or in relationship, romantic relationship, if you find yourself not appreciating yourself, you will find the very people that don't appreciate you as much and or will leverage that, or that it could turn into something toxic, or simply they will help you see how much you don't love yourself, right? Same thing with your health. Now, when you come to understand that your identity truly governs your reality, your singular most important mission is to make sure your identity matches your goals. Rather than, oh, I'm just going to work on my behavior. I'm just going to work more, do more. Look, you can never, listen carefully, you can never outwork your identity. You never can. Because if you try to, your identity will unconsciously shut you down and sabotage you. You can never outwork your identity. So your most important mission here is to optimize your identity by understanding first, what do I identify with? What are these attributes? What are these equation marks, right? Me equals what? If you understand that, then we can understand the consequences of these definitions, these identity attributes. And once we understand that, we can do the reprogramming. So I want to pick this and make this topic the first episode after, the introduction, so that you begin to see this is where we begin the upgrade. This is where we begin to understand what governs our reality. It's our identity. Now, as intangible as that may sound, the moment you begin to shift your identity, it will cause a massive ripple effect in your belief system and your value system, right? And that causes the change subconsciously. And this is the key part I'll leave you with. If you understand human behaviors, you'll notice that only a small, teeny percentage of our behaviors are conscious, meaning you consciously know. But things, many behaviors, many things that we do simply are unconscious, and we don't even know we're doing it, right? The way your face looks when you talk in front of people, right? The words you say, your breathing rate, many of the things, sure, you could have control over it if you were conscious of it, but they are governed by your subconscious. And your subconscious is governed by your identity. So if you, let's get real specific real fast. If you, for example, don't identify as a multi-millionaire, and you happen to be speaking to someone at a conference or a networking event that could help you along your path to become that multi-millionaire, you may find yourself in that very setting, yet your identity does not allow you to. Therefore, it will cause you to deprioritize talking to that person, whether consciously or subconsciously. And then even if you did talk to that person, you will believe that you're not worthy, you're not supposed to, this is not possible, and or you will somehow exhibit behaviors that sabotages the rapport, the trust, the comfort between you and that person that can get you where you want. That is a problem. That is why we must identify what those attributes are in our identity. And by identifying them, we can then begin to work on them. And as you go and listen to the next episode, we're going to talk about how do you work on your identity? What is our value system, right? Why is that important? And then we're going to show you a very easy way of optimizing. Now, of course, optimization means you got to do the work as well, right? It's not like I'm going to talk you through this and you're magically going to transform. In fact, we give you all the good stuff in this podcast. So as you keep listening, subscribe and follow and share with your friends. We're going to give you all the good stuff. Many of the formulas that in the past were only available in our really expensive trainings. But here's why we're doing this, right? People hire us for really implementation, but we want all of you to have as much exposure, as much understanding of the science, the techniques, the strategies behind them. So if for some reason you couldn't afford to work with us or you're not yet ready to work with us, you can begin at least your journey to upgrade. See you in the next episode.